Welcome. Thank you for joining the U.S. Data Management Project Management Practice Best Series Practice Webinar. I'm Becky Melody, your hostess for today's session. Gary Meek, USDM's Project Management Practice Lead, will be presenting. The discussion today will cover introductions, webinar logistics, direction for post-webinar collaboration, and our discussion topic, the role of a project manager in Agile projects. We're proud to have Gary Meek presenting today. He is the Global Practice Lead for USDM's Project Management team, and he brings with him 25 years in program management and, of course, project management, with more than 10 of those years in the life science domain. Gary has presented on project and change management to multiple forums, and he's a recognized leader in his field. He's a subject matter expert in program and project leadership, organizational change, strategic planning, and building teamwork. He has worked with small, medium, and large life science firms worldwide and recently led cross-functional global project teams, including major organizational transformations and integrations. USDM is focused exclusively on the life science domain. We're the market leader in providing IT, quality, and regulatory IT compliance professional service solutions. USDM's practice areas include quality and auditing, ECM, ERP, PLM, manufacturing automation and equipment, clinical and drug safety, business intelligence, laboratory systems and equipment, GRC, and of course, project management. We're headquartered in Ventura, California, and we've delivered more than 1,000 successful projects with over 200 life science clients. And we offer hands-on experience in assisting clients under regulatory distress. We're the market leader for validation accelerator packs. The content of today's presentation will be covered in about 30 minutes, and then we'll invite you to join us with questions for the team via the iLink message board on the lower left of your screen, or after the session, you can join us for discussions on LinkedIn and post any questions there. If your questions are of a confidential nature, we're of course happy to address them offline. We do appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and now I'll turn the presentation over to Gary.
Hello, my name is Gary Meek, and as Becky said, I head up the project management practice at USDM. Glad you could join today. And today we're going to be talking about managing projects in an Agile environment, and specifically the role of the project manager. So we'll talk a little bit about an overview of the Agile development methodology. I'm sure most of you are familiar, so we'll do that very quickly. Talk a little bit about the concept of managing an Agile project, and is or is that not a contradiction? Adapting your traditional project management style and knowledge to a more Agile environment. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how do you sell Agile to the executives in your organization and to the rest of the team to start using this methodology for developing software. And then lastly, we'll turn it back over to Becky, and she'll take any questions that you might have. So why are we here? So today I want to give you a little bit of the background and the context around Agile and how we use Agile in a development world. We're going to walk through a little bit about the role of the PM, some of the skills that a project manager has today from a traditional project type environment onto more of a less structured way, if you will, using the Agile methodology. And then lastly, again, we'll talk about, selling Agile to your organization. It's a big sell. It's a difficult concept for many of the executives to grasp. It's a different culture, if you will. So it's not an easy change for the organization to make. So moving on, why is this relevant? Studies are starting to show that Agile is a more cost-effective way to develop software. It reduces the number of defects and bugs that you see in the software. It's a lower cost way of doing software development, and more importantly, it's a very customer-centric approach to developing software. More and more companies are adopting Agile as their method for developing applications. Certainly more and more in the life sciences world are starting to do that, and we did a seminar a couple of months ago on validating Agile software development. So if you're interested in that webinar, it's up on our website as well. And then, the project management approach and the project management skills necessary to manage Agile are somewhat different than the traditional approaches that project managers take. And so this seminar will help you kind of see the differences in the two approaches and see how you transition your skill set that is more traditional to a more Agile, more customer-centric approach. So a little bit about Agile for those of you who aren't real familiar with it. It's called a lot of different things: Agile, iterative development, many different terms. It's used in many, many different ways. Everyone seems to have their own slight twist or nuance on Agile development. The original manifesto for Agile basically has concepts, and it's individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And so on the left-hand side, that's really the Agile approach, and as you can see on the right-hand side, it's really more of the traditional way of doing things. We create a lot of documentation. We create a massive project plan. We create a contract, if you will, via a statement of work or a project charter, and then we go on trying to deploy whatever the application is by following the plan. So Agile takes a little bit of a different approach. It does. It acknowledges the fact that we don't know everything when we get started about the requirements. We don't know everything about the plan, and that how do we develop a plan that's going to stay consistent for 12 months when we don't know what's going to happen in 6 months to the business or to the environment. So basically the idea is we have an idea, we come up with a list of functions or requirements, and then we start iterating through developing those requirements via typically something called a product backlog. And we then deploy that to some kind of environment, either to a production environment, or we continue to iterate through until we get to the point where we have a solid release to go to market. So that's really the concept of Agile development. And again, I know I'm going through this fairly quickly because I assume that most of you already are fully aware of the Agile, at least to some extent, the Agile development methodology. So kind of in an overview, what is Agile? It's an iterative software development approach, really focuses on that walking through the requirements, a set of requirements at a time, and getting something to production or getting something to market quicker, with less defects and more customer-centric, so that they are able to get the product that they want in a quicker time frame. It was formally introduced in 2001 when they came out with the Agile Manifesto. The one thing that Agile is not, and this is something that I wanted to clarify, it's not a reason, it's not an excuse for not doing documentation or controlling the project. I've worked recently with a number of organizations that use Agile software development, and they are very, very structured in their approach. It's a high-quality organization. They do things very quickly, but they also do things very well, and they're able to predictably deliver their software to market. So that's a little bit about Agile. And now talking about the traditional project manager and the traditional approach for how we manage projects. So it's typically, you know, we negotiate with the clients, we come up with some level of scope, then we go off, we plan, we come up with an estimate, we create probably in many times a lengthy Microsoft project schedule, and then we proceed to do the best we can to stick to that plan and control the project to a plan that we created that may, in many cases, may be 12 to 18 months long. And so, you know, scope is the primary driver of the project. The entire plan and the entire project is based on an approved project plan that we created at the beginning of the project, where we may or may not know exactly what it is we're trying to deliver. Because we don't know what it is we're trying to deliver, those estimates may or may not be good, and we try to do the best we can, obviously. But these are some of the reasons why we see a very high failure rate in projects. The approach just isn't reliable, and we don't know what it's going to cost, and we don't really know what the time frame is. So the typical tools that the traditional project manager has is the project plan and the Gantt chart, and then they do weekly, monthly project meetings, stakeholder meetings, governance committee meetings. So the communication, the face-to-face communication is very infrequent. So this leads to a lot of miscommunication, people feeling like they're really not in the loop of what's going on, making it difficult to really continue to adjust and to drive the project forward. They get a project plan in the beginning, they approve it, and then they expect you to stick to it. So the Agile project manager looks at things a bit differently. So managing the Agile from an Agile project manager perspective is the focus is on time and cost rather than scope. So we start the project with a business unit or a business leader saying, I have this much money and I want to get this done by the end of Q2, and here's kind of a high-level description of what we're trying to achieve. So that's really the beginning of it, and so we don't necessarily have a scope. We have a list of high-level requirements, or again, a product backlog, and we start the project based on those key elements. We agree on what those items are in advance. The performance indicators become the size of the backlog, so the list of the functional requirements that we're trying to deliver, and then the velocity. How fast can we deliver those things in each iteration? And so the backlog becomes a prioritized list of requirements. We already know what our time is and what our cost is. And from an Agile perspective, then we just go about delivering those things as quickly as we can deliver them, and we may or may not get all the way to the end. The other approach would be to have a list of requirements, have a plan in place, and not necessarily, we would find out partway through that they're more complicated, or we didn't know about that requirement, and we're left with a couple of choices. We go back to the business and say, we need more money and we need more time. We can't deliver to the scope, or we have to do something different. We have to change things, and of course, cost is a big driver in the organization because the budget is set. Typically, it's very difficult to go back and get more money. So that's really how the Agile approach works. The velocity, as I mentioned, is how fast we can deliver these requirements in a set time frame. And so what makes this very interesting and kind of a different approach is that in Agile, you're not necessarily planning by hours or by duration. You're planning by any way. So one of the companies that I worked with recently planned on points, and I've seen that many times. They assign a functional requirement, and then the developers pick a number of points for an iteration, and the organization, the software developers, learn over time as they continue to do this how many points can they deliver in a given iteration. And so, again, that's what makes the Agile approach very interesting, is that they're able to learn and continuously adjust, as opposed to, again, on the flip side, the traditional projects are more, this task will take this number of hours. Certainly there are organizations that learn from those things and do better estimates as time goes on, but it's really not built into the process. It's more the exception to the rule than the Agile approach, where that's really kind of the rule. We continuously adjust, we continuously learn, and we take those learnings and adjust our future velocity for how fast we can deliver things. And so the typical tools then don't become the lengthy Microsoft project plan and tasks and activities and effort. It becomes a burn down chart. And again, I'm not sure how many of you are really familiar with burn down charts, but burn down charts basically say there's this many, and again, I'll use points as the terminology, whatever that means to your organization and however you choose to use it. But we have this many points, and it essentially draws a line from, let's say a 3-week sprint. You would create a chart that says this is 100 points and we're going to deliver it in 3 weeks. And it draws a straight line from 100 to 0 over that 3-week time frame. And so as a project manager then, as you continuously learn and continuously reevaluate where you actually stand, you can see which side of that line you fall on. Am I ahead of schedule or am I behind schedule? And it's a very simple way to see exactly where you stand along that line. So then the other difference, if you will, for Agile versus the traditional is the daily meetings, the daily stand-up, what they call stand-up meetings. And again, these are different in every organization. Typically what I see is they're about 15 minutes to 30 minutes. If it's any longer than that, people get tired of standing up. So, but it's really, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. It's a quick roundtable discussion of where we are, what's going on in the project. Each person can give an indication of what progress they've made, what's left to be done, and it becomes a very quick way to, again, face-to-face, have a conversation about where you stand. So the key to the Agile environment is communication, and it's the continual face-to-face or phone call in global organizations, conversations about status and where the developers need help and what obstacles are in the way and what things do you have to do as a project manager to clear them. So it's a very different approach to managing projects. So as a PM then, based on this new, what does it take from a project management perspective? So the key skills for this Agile approach is the facilitation. So it's facilitating these meetings, making sure that they stand to 15 minutes or maybe 30 minutes tops. It's being able to make sure that the team is continually moving forward and helping facilitate that team spirit and working together and communicating out. And then it's coaching. It's working with the teams to make sure they understand the approach, make sure that they're working together, making sure that they're building quality products. It's making sure that the executives are getting the information they want, making sure that the executives understand the approach and how this is different. So it's really much more of a communicator as opposed to what I typically refer to the traditional project manager is the process police, if you will. They give you a task, and at the end of the week they'll want a status report from you to find out where you stand on that task. And in between, there's very little communication between the PM and the rest of the team. So it focuses on less reports and emails and focuses more on personal interactions, talking to the team, talking to the stakeholders, having that interaction and that constant communication. The focus is on the continuous planning and the learning because we're constantly adjusting the schedule, because we're constantly adjusting what's going into the build because the business is changing. You're continuously planning as opposed to planning up front and then driving and controlling to that end. And then there's a big need to collaborate and facilitate communications between the stakeholders and team. And again, that's a slightly different skill set than what you're probably used to as a project manager. Again, I'll point back to some of the previous webinars that we've done from the project management practice, and they focus on, changing an organization and building teamwork, and that's really the role here. It's definitely not, let me plan and control and govern over the activities. It's really collaborating and facilitating between the teams and the stakeholders. Your job as a project manager is different. You have two primary responsibilities: keep the team moving forward and making sure that you're doing everything you can to remove the barriers to progress. So working with the resource managers to get additional resources, or sending people to training, or you have an issue where you're not getting time from the business organization, or whatever the case may be. The role as an Agile project manager is to really act as a buffer for the team and really just continuously eliminate those barriers and continuously allow them to progress forward in doing their job. And then, as I mentioned before, it's an entirely different mindset. It's really about the communication as opposed to, driving toward the scope, time, and cost. So again, it's going from process-oriented to people and team-focused. It's again, going back to the manifesto, it's the people over the processes, and it's really adopting that mindset of communication is your primary focus for these types of projects. So, at least at this point, I hope you're thinking to yourself, "Wow, this sounds really good. How do we get this in our organization, or at least how do we start to experiment with moving this forward?" So again, the key point here is that when we do traditional project plans, we know we don't know all the answers. We're doing the best we can to estimate. We're doing the best we can to put together the plan, but we know we don't know all the answers. And so Agile accepts that as a premise and says, okay, we know we don't know all the answers. We know that the business is going to change over some set in time period and may adjust their priorities. We know all these things are going to happen, so let's just put a methodology and let's just put the project in place based on the fact that we don't know all of these things, and then start to drive it from there. So, key selling point to the business and key selling point to the executives, this allows the business to change without throwing the project away or without major adjustments and major costs to the project. we do 3-week sprints. We can adjust the next sprint. We can adjust 2 sprints from there, but we can continually adjust to make sure that the project continues to focus on the business priorities as opposed to something that we agreed upon last year. So that's the key selling point. So consequently, we're allowed to have much more control over the success of our projects. We're able to adjust and we're able to change the project as we go forward, so that gives us much more control over what's going on. The teams are working closely together. So we're collaborating, solving problems rather than sending a bunch of emails with CYAs. That's really, again, the difference in the organizations. We have a team that's working together as opposed to people trying to be heroes, people working night and day, people sending emails solely for the purpose of making sure that they don't get blamed, all of those kinds of things. And so again, as a project manager, that's really your job, to be able to facilitate that teamwork and to facilitate the communication, make sure that we're all working together, we're all on the same team. And then, you know, statistics show that Agile produces better quality and lower cost software. Again, that's a proven commodity. That's something that should be part of the selling process. And the easiest part of all, right, is if I'm delivering quality and I'm delivering it on time and I've got customers that are happy, that doesn't make the sell really hard. So, you know, I think that's something that speaks for itself. Again, the statistics are out there. Do a search across the internet, and you'll see statistics that show that using Agile development methodology is a much lower cost, higher quality methodology. And so with that, that's the project manager for Agile projects in a nutshell. I know it was very quick. I know there's still a lot of details that we could get into, but I'd be happy to take whatever questions you have at this point.
Thank you, Gary. Really appreciate you sharing that solid information. As Gary mentioned, we will now open the floor for questions. And while you're typing those questions in, I would remind you that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website, which is usdatamanagement.com. You can also check out our site for the previously presented sessions, which are across the various practice areas, and view the upcoming schedule for webinars. For example, next week we're going to be discussing validating SharePoint in the life sciences, and the main topic is real lessons learned. So let your IT and any SharePoint folks know to join in for that. Okay, it looks like our first question is from Joe, and he's asking, what are the biggest challenges to adopting Agile in life science organization?
So yeah, so the two biggest challenges are the mindset of the executives. So again, it's a bit of a different approach. They're not going to be getting a bunch of reports, and they're not going to be getting a bunch of paper copies of things. It's really a different mindset in how we approach the communication and how the message, if you will, is delivered. So that's the first one, and then the second one obviously is, you know, how do we validate Agile development in a life sciences organization? And there's certainly approaches to doing that. We talked about those a couple of months ago, but that's really, those two are really the biggest challenges. We're changing the organization and the way they approach it, and validation, certainly with the more risk-adverse quality folks, becomes a challenge to the Agile development methodology.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Our next question is from Ed. With respect to selling, can you speak to overcoming the cost and or resistance of the user to be as involved as necessary when they have their normal job to do?
And again, that's certainly a challenge. My experience has been that they are more likely to be involved when it's more of a collaboration and they feel like they're part of the team and they feel like they're able to have input into what we're developing and what it looks like. I've found that the folks in Agile projects are much more interested in being involved than in the traditional projects where we throw a 50-page requirements document at them and ask them to review it, and then we build it, they see it, they don't like it, and we say, oh, but in the requirements document it said this, so that's how we built it. Even if it doesn't work for you, we built it the way that, it's a contractual negotiation. So at least that's my experience.
Thank you, Gary. Another question kind of in the same zone, the getting buy-in from decision makers does seem to offer some challenges here. Shelley is saying, I appreciate the slide on selling internally, and as the PM, what action can I take that would offer most success to gain decision maker buy-in?
Yeah, so I think it's the one of those is the statistical evidence that internal customers are happier. They get more of the software that they were looking for as opposed to the traditional methodology. Again, that contract where we're driving to build something whether you like it or not. That's what you said you wanted 12 months ago. That's what we're going to build. And so as you walk the executives through the process and get them to fully understand the Agile approach and what you're trying to do, then they, at least again, in my experience, tend to be, I guess, easily persuaded once they see the evidence and they see the information right in front of them.
Thank you. Here's a follow-up question from Ed. Wouldn't Scrum, which is SCRUM, masters argue that much of what you defined as PM responsibilities is really the responsibility of the Scrum Master?
Yeah, and then a lot of times we see that when there are true Scrum Masters, the projects don't necessarily have PMs. So again, it's kind of the take that the organization takes on the Agile approach and whether they're going to use Scrum or a different flavor of Agile.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gary. Any additional questions, feel free to reach out and send them over to us. You can find the contact information available. Here, I'll put it up for you. There you go. See the email at the bottom and send any questions that you'd like me to get connected to Gary for you. Certainly happy to do that. We do encourage you to join our discussion forum on LinkedIn. We welcome your insight, your feedback, and certainly suggestions for future topics. Help us to know what pain points you're struggling with in compliance, and we'll do our best to answer them and offer support as indicated there. If you did appreciate today's presentation, please let us know by clicking the like button on the USDM LinkedIn group page or post a comment there. That will go a long way to support our continuing of the webinar series throughout the coming year. Thank you so much again for taking the time to join us. We look forward to future discussions. And Gary, thanks so much for presenting. We really do appreciate you sharing your knowledge base there with us. And on behalf of the USDM team, we appreciate this opportunity to team with you towards excellence in compliance. Have a wonderful day.